before anything else, let me answer what you probably thought when you saw the thumbnail. Why 0.8%? And why did this video show up specifically for me? I'll tell you right now, no mystery, no fluff. The algorithm didn't choose you because you're special. It chose you because your psychological behavior isn't common. Most people scroll through the feed the same way they move through life, on autopilot. But there's a specific kind of person who stops, who feels, questions, and observes beyond the surface. And when someone like that appears, the algorithm knows. It identifies patterns of reflection, long pauses, internal searching, very specific signals, all based on the other videos you've watched on the platform. And that's why you landed exactly here. You don't feel out of place because something is wrong with you. You feel out of place because you were never born to copy anyone. But no one explains what that actually means in practice. No one tells you the emotional cost of it. No one tells you what happens when a person who thinks differently tries to live in a world built for people who don't think. And that's what I'm going to show you here. But hold on, you're only going to understand everything I have to say at the very end. There's a detail about people who feel out of place that almost no one notices. And when you discover it, so much of your life finally makes sense. Let's get straight to it, because now you need to understand the root of what made you feel out of place for so many years, even when no one around you seemed to notice. There's a silent pattern shared by almost everyone who feels out of place. This sensation didn't start when you became an adult. It started much earlier. Think with me. From a young age, you noticed things others ignored. You sensed the atmosphere of a room before anyone said a word. You felt intentions, saw patterns, understood silences. While most people only wanted to go with the flow, you wanted to understand why the flow existed. And here comes the first shock. People who feel too much learn to adapt early. You learned to speak less so you wouldn't seem strange, to agree with things that didn't match who you were, to fit into places you didn't want to be, just so you wouldn't be seen as different. But there's a problem with that, a huge problem. The more you adapt, the more you lose yourself. And that's not an exaggeration. It's emotional math. If you spend years shrinking yourself to fit into small spaces, there comes a moment when you look around and think, okay, but where do I actually belong? And guess what? Nothing answers. And that's where many people get stuck for life, because they don't see what's really happening. People who feel out of place are almost always people who never had the chance to be whole. But what comes next is worse. And very few people talk about it. Now comes the part that usually hurts, but is also the part that frees you the most. There's an almost invisible behavior in people who always felt out of place. They become experts at making themselves smaller. It's almost automatic. You learn to lower the intensity of your voice so you don't seem like too much. You learn to hide your opinion so you won't be seen as difficult. You learn to laugh when you want to leave, to stay when you want to go, to accept little because at least it's something. And the world interprets that as shyness, insecurity, sensitivity. But it's none of that. It's self-protection. You realized early that being yourself had a price. And to survive socially, you started cutting pieces of yourself just to fit in. But that constant adjustment creates consequences. When you hide, people connect with a version of you that doesn't even exist. And that deepens the feeling of being out of place. And here comes the validation no one ever gave you. It's not that you don't fit. It's that you've never found an environment capable of matching your depth. Shallow environments can't hold deep people. Weak relationships can't handle someone who feels intensely. And disconnected places don't welcome minds that think too much. We've reached the point where everything starts to make sense. And maybe this is the most important part of the whole video, because it flips the board upside down. You spent your entire life trying to fit into places that didn't speak your emotional language, and every failed attempt only reinforced that silent belief. Something is wrong with me. But now comes the rupture, the shift in logic that changes everything. You didn't feel out of place because you were too different. You felt out of place because you were trying to exist in spaces far too small for who you are. And that's not romanticizing. It's psychological reality. Being a deep person in a shallow environment will always feel like inadequacy. Having a real identity in groups that prefer copies will always seem like stubbornness. Having heavy thoughts among people who never reflect will always look like exaggeration. But here's the turning point. The problem was never you. It was the size of the environments you tried to squeeze yourself into. And here comes the practical part, the one that starts breaking this cycle. Your place in the world isn't something you find ready-made. It's something you build. When you understand that, the feeling of not belonging stops hurting you and starts guiding you. Because it becomes a compass. It shows you where you don't belong, where you shouldn't insist, where you don't need to shrink. After everything you've heard, only one thing truly needs to stay clear. You're not out of place. You're different, and that was never a flaw. The real shift happens when you understand that there is no right place waiting for you somewhere out there. That's an illusion they sold you. Your place isn't something you discover. It's something you construct. And when you stop shrinking yourself to fit, everything changes. You attract people who speak the same emotional language you do. You find environments that don't ask you to be less. You begin to exist whole, not fragmented. And what once felt like not belonging becomes clarity. Because, deep down, the feeling of being out of place was always a warning. This place isn't yours. And it wasn't. The moment you decide to build your own space, your way, at your pace, something happens almost instantly. You stop seeking approval from the wrong people and start surrounding yourself with the right ones. And then, finally, everything makes sense. What you were searching for wasn't fitting in. It was direction, identity, and authentic belonging. And now you know, your place in the world isn't small, isn't shallow, and isn't ready. It's made by you, and only by you. If this helped you see something no one ever explained before, you're already one step ahead of most people.